Hello and welcome to Subversive Radio. I'm your host, Keith Giles. Thank you for listening in. This podcast is going to be sort of a semi-review / reaction commentary after watching the film American Sniper. There's been a whole lot of chatter, if you've been online, Twitter and Facebook and blogs, etc., people both defending the film and Chris Kyle, the subject of the film, who was supposedly the most lethal sniper in, I guess, during the war in Iraq. But also, people supporting him as well as kind of trashing him and the film, or at least criticizing the film and criticizing Chris Kyle for various reasons. And so I wanted to just kind of offer my reaction. And I have read a lot of these articles and blogs, and I have shared several of them on my Twitter and Facebook pages. And I've had conversations with people about the subjects that it brings up, which I've been talking about anyway. I've been talking about violence, nonviolence, following Jesus into the direction of proactive, preemptive love as compared to a nationalism that supports and applauds and justifies war, just war theory, and all those kinds of things. So, but I wanted to wait until I had actually seen the film myself. So I had some time this afternoon, and I just only a few hours ago returned from seeing the film. It's all very fresh in my mind, and I wanted to just give you some things off the top of my head, kind of impressions and things that I had, the kind of things I feel like the movie stirred up in me. Okay, so honestly, I guess what when I saw the film and walked out of the theater and got in my car to drive home, these are the thoughts that were just kind of running through my mind. I was raised from the youngest I can remember, some of my earliest memories, really raised by television. And then raised, my entertainment was television. And when I grew up, by the time I was old enough to actually watch and understand what I was looking at, probably late 60s, early 70s, all my heroes had guns. Matt Dillon and Gunsmoke, and James West from the Wild Wild West show, and he was my favorite. And, Beretta and Starsky and Hutch and James Bond and Mannix and, everything. And I just grew up, and that's just the way it was. The good guys had a gun and the bad guys had a gun, and the good guys won because they were better with their gun, and they were good, and they were right. And so bad guys lost. But it was just never a thought for me. I mean, I grew up, I loved cowboys. I loved guns. I had a toy box full of guns, and I had every kind of gun. I had rifles and pistols. I had military guns to play Army. I had cowboy guns to play cowboy. I had secret agent guns to play secret agent. I even had flintlocks and muskets to play Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett. Because guns, that was just what you needed. Everywhere I went, I had a gun. I used to wear cowboy boots, and I would keep a gun or a knife in my boot all the time. We'd go out to a restaurant, I have a little toy gun in my boot. I thought I was cool, And violence, I guess, because I was raised on television and I was raised on that kind of redemptive violence, it's never bothered me. I have just never had a point in my life where I was shocked by it, offended by it. Frankly, don't understand why people do get upset about violence. Even raising my own children, I'll freely admit, we only ask them to look away from a movie we're watching if there's sex or nudity. But we never ask them to look away from violence because I've just never, it's the way I was raised. I just am realizing I've been raised on a steady diet of violence and taught to see it as it's just what you do to tell stories. I mean, it's part of our entertainment. It's part of our mythology, If you read a book and there was no violence in it, what was the point? If you watched a movie and there was no shootout or car chase or explosion, then why watch it? How could you even do something like that? I can even remember a time in my life, this is going to sound really stupid, but I think it illustrates what I'm saying. I remember a significant time in my life when I was probably 12 or 13, and there was a TV show that came on. There were so many TV shows about cops and private investigators and spies and, lawyers and all that kind of stuff. But there was one show that stood out to me for its uniqueness and its creativity and its inventiveness. And it was a show called Banachek. I think it was George Papard was in it. And the thing about Banachek that even as a young man watching this show that stood out to me and was so curious to me was that Banachek didn't carry a gun. And I thought that was so unique. I thought that was so inventive. Wow, a hero who doesn't carry a gun, who doesn't want a gun, who doesn't need a gun. And that was the first time I think I remember thinking, you can be a hero without a gun. You could be a good guy and not need or even want a gun. But nevertheless, I have been raised my whole life, and my whole culture has been steeped in this idea of guns. And when I got old enough to shoot, I was probably 12 or 13, I remember very vividly my dad taking me out, driving me out. We lived in Texas, so we drove out to the desert, a little place where we could get a backstop, and my dad had a .22 single-shot bolt-action rifle and taught me all the rules, from the beginning. You never point a gun at anybody. You treat every gun as if it's loaded. You never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot. You always have the gun on safety. Things like that. You sight down the barrel. You squint your eye. You beat it in. You take a deep breath. You squeeze the trigger slowly. You never jerk on the trigger. You exhale, and when you exhale, you slowly squeeze the trigger. Those kinds of things. And I remembered all of it. And I remember shooting and enjoying shooting. And as soon as I was old enough and had a job and I could raise my own money, I bought my own guns. I had a .22 automatic pistol. I had a Ruger Mark II .22 pistol that was accurate, the most accurate gun I ever fired in my life. I had a Winchester Defender shotgun with a riot barrel and a pump action and a pistol grip. I had a Browning high-power 9mm pistol with Packmeyer grips. And in fact, I think the beginning of the breaking down of that mythology for me was when I met Wendy, and I was in college. And I knew she was the one I loved, and I knew she was the one I wanted to marry. And I saw in her a love and a compassion for other people that I wished I had. I didn't have it, and I wanted it. And I knew that was something that I needed to be near her and around her for that to rub off on me. And I remember going and selling that Packmeyer grip 9mm Browning high-power pistol, brand new. I bought it brand new. I paid over $500 for that thing. Sold it, and I think to the dollar when I went to go buy Wendy's engagement ring. That's what I sold that gun for is exactly what it cost to buy that engagement ring. And that was, to me, was the beginning to shed that mythology of redemptive violence. This idea that if we just kill enough people, we can make the world a better place. And I began to doubt that. I began to see that maybe that wasn't true. And it's taken a long time for me. I've been married 25 years. It's only been in the last 10 years or so that I think I've really aggressively begun to take seriously what it means to follow Jesus, to take seriously the implications of Jesus' words that what credit is it to me if I only love those who love me? That everyone does that, pagans, unbelievers do that, but that followers of Jesus, people who are transformed by his love others with that same transformational love, with the hope that they might also be transformed. So what does all this have to do with American Sniper? Well, as I sat there in the theater, hearing people around me cheering and clapping, shouting out at the screen, urging Chris Kyle to pull the trigger to kill the 9-year-old kid with a grenade. Kill him! Shoot him! Shoot him! Or cheering, clapping, applauding spontaneously when the bullet, slow motion, flies through the air and blows apart the head of the evil sniper from the Iraqi side. And the applause that broke out at the end when the American flag is playing and taps. The American flag is waving and taps is playing, and people are saluting, and that whole rah-rah nationalism, America is God's nation. And it's, I don't buy it anymore. I don't believe it anymore. But I was in a room full of people tonight who definitely did. And I can understand why they do, because that's how I was raised. And if Jesus hadn't stopped me and changed me and turned me around, I would have been standing and cheering right along with them. So, this movie, on the one hand, if you could take a step back, I think, and just say, I think because it's about a real person, and it's about a real event, and events, and real people, and a real place, and something that really happened, that our government really did, and our soldiers actually participated in. It's the reality of it that makes it difficult for me to accept and just say, well, that was awesome, dude. 12-year-old me, 15-year-old me, even 20-year-old me would have said, what a kick-ass movie. And if it had been a film about maybe a fictitious person, let's just write a screenplay about a soldier who believes in what he's doing and is doing the best he can with what he's got, you could say, yeah, wow, what a great performance, what a great movie, what a great directing. But it isn't. It's a real person. It's a real story, real people, real human beings, both sides of the war. And it definitely makes an impact on you. It just doesn't, I don't believe it makes all the impacts it should in the ways that it should or could. There's a couple of places in the film. In fact, right at the beginning, it's the very, very kind of opening sequence of the film, where I feel the film participates in the same propaganda that its director, Clint Eastwood, has said he wanted to expose. And so I disagree with, I don't believe him. I believe he actually made a film that caters to and panders to the American propaganda, that we're the good guys. And that whatever we do, because we do it, it's good. And that the bad guys, whatever they do, because they're savages, we've dehumanized them. That's evil. There's a scene at the beginning where we see it's a flashback sequence, we see a very young Chris Kyle being taught by his father how to hunt. He makes his first kill as a young man, kills a deer. And then we flash forward the very next scene, and Chris Kyle with his brother, his younger brother, and his mom and dad are sitting in a church service, hearing the pastor give a sermon. And young Chris Kyle reaches forward and sees a little blue, pocket-sized Gideon New Testament in the front there next to the hymnals, and he picks it up and he puts it in his pocket, and he keeps it. And he keeps it the entire movie. You see him, even as an adult, he's got it stuffed in his... you never see him reading it, but he's got it, he's carrying it. And the scene after that is his father, Chris Kyle's father, giving a lecture to his two boys, saying that there are three kinds of people in this world. There are sheep, the people that are too weak to stand up for themselves. There are the wolves, the bullies, who prey upon them. And then there are sheepdogs, who are strong enough and tough enough to protect the sheep from the wolf. And this is told in such a way, when you juxtapose it with a church building, a pastor preaching a sermon, a New Testament Bible being picked up by a small child and put in his pocket, a father talking to his sons about sheep and wolves, that the assumption is that what is being said is part of the Christian story, and it's woven into the fabric of the American story, and that America is the sheepdog. There are sheep and there are wolves. Now, sheep, of course, are good, and wolves, of course, are evil and satanic. And sheepdogs are also good, but sometimes they need to be their dogs, so they're kind of close to a wolf. They're not quite a sheep, and not quite a wolf. They're somewhere in between. And unfortunately, with that story, not only is it wrong, and not only is it not a Christian story, the Christian story is that we are sheep. And like it or not, we're sheep. Man, we don't like that Jesus called us sheep. We want to be wolves. We want to strut. We want to put on the leather jacket, and we want to crank the throttle on our motorcycle, and we want to rum. Here we are, baby. We're here to kick some butt. But that's not who we are. That's not who Jesus was. And Jesus told us that he was sending us out like sheep among wolves. Not to be sheepdogs, but to be sheep. Not to overcome evil with evil, but to overcome evil with good. That is what we are truly called to do. And the film, of course, does dehumanize the enemy. I think back again when I was a kid, when I loved cowboys and Indians. I loved John Wayne. I loved pretending to be a cowboy, playing, cowboys and Indians with my friends. And the Indians were the savages. The Indians were the evil, inhuman. We have to dehumanize our enemies. And so therefore the cowboy was the good guy, defending his land, defending his wife, defending his children from these savage, murderous Indians who just only wanted to kill them. I don't know, because they loved freedom, or maybe because they just didn't understand our civilized ways, or what have you. But when I became an adult and I read American history, and I discovered what really happened to the Native Americans in this country, I realized the truth. And I want to go back and rewatch those Westerns again, because now I'm going to cheer for those Native Americans, because they were the heroes. They were the good guys. We were the bad guys. I would love to see them make a movie. I would love to see American Sniper, a movie made from the perspective of the Iraqi people. I would love to see a movie where the first 20 minutes we meet a wonderful, loving father with his beautiful wife and their 3 or 4 kids, and that we get to meet their kids one by one, and we get to hear about their hopes and their dreams of the future, and see them sharing meals together, laughing together, playing together, just living life as a family together. Maybe they sit down ready for their meal and bow their heads to ask a blessing, and a bomb blows up the side of their house, and American soldiers run in with machine guns and shove them up the noses of their parents, and flip over their 9-year-old son because he's a male, and tie his hands behind his back, and then take over their home for the next week, eating all of their food, taking all of whatever they want because they can, and yet call themselves freedom fighters and call themselves liberators. Because that's the movie I'd like to see, and that's the movie I would like for the American people to see. I don't expect we're going to see that movie, and if we did, I don't think it would be as well received as American Sniper was. But we've always done that. My whole life, I've been told that. I was told the Native Americans, the Indians, were the bad guys. I was told later on in my life that the black people, they were the bad guys. They were the Mexicans. Black people, they're shifty, and they'll lie to you and lie to your face. All of them carry a razor blade. They'll cut you if they can. They'll steal from you. You got to keep your eye on them all the time. Mexicans are lazy. They'll do everything they can to get out of work. My whole life I was told these things. And now, of course, it's Muslims. Muslims, their religion teaches them to hate Christians. Their scriptures tell them to kill people. It's a hateful, murderous religion. All of them are hateful. All of them are evil. They're all savages. That's what we're told in American Sniper. They're savages. But let me tell you what I've learned. I have had Muslims in my home joining us in our house church. I've eaten at table with Muslims, and they're just like me. And I've met Mexican people. I grew up with them. You know what? They're just like me. I met black people. They're just like me. and Native Americans, they're just like me, and they're just like you. We're all human beings, and none of us are savages and monsters. Now, we are if that's all we to tell ourselves, because it makes it easier to blow them up and shoot their children and destroy their homes and take what we want and exploit their resources. I tell you what, this movie, if there's some good things I could say about it, I think there are some good things about the film. I do think the film at least attempts to at least address the fact that there is such a thing as post-traumatic stress disorder, although we really don't see it. We see the effects of it, but we really don't see that Chris Kyle made much progress in that area. We see him making a little bit of progress, but we don't really see how, and we don't really get any sense of how we are supposed to help veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I want to say also that I've heard some people say that, well, American soldiers are killing themselves. By the way, more American soldiers have been killed by their own guns in suicide because they've killed themselves after coming back from war than have been killed in war overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq. That should tell you something. And I've heard people say, when they hear that statistic, I've heard them say, well, it's because our government doesn't take care of them when they come home. And you know what? I'm sorry. Bull. That is not why. Let me tell you why they're blowing their brains out. Simply because when they get over there, the things they are asked to do and the things that they have been told to do are different than what they were told they were doing when they first signed up. And when they get over there and they are given orders that are atrocious, when they are commanded to take the lives of children, families, in the name of whatever, that's what jacks with you. That's what messes with you. The war is what is messing with them. War is what is killing them. It's just not killing them with a bullet. It's killing them by ripping their heart and their soul out of their body, that when they come home, they don't know how to deal with it. Now, yeah, we could maybe deal with it a little better if we gave them better counseling and we made it more mandatory. There's all sorts of things I could say that, yes, would be better if we took care of our veterans. And if we're going to give ourselves a pat on the back and say that we are pro-military and we love our soldiers and we support our troops, which is the rhetoric of our Congress, that we support our troops. It's the rhetoric of our president that we support our troops. But then we really don't support our troops. We make their children and their wives stand in lines to get food from the food bank to feed their kids because we're not paying them enough. We're not, the veterans office is backed up, right? And there's really no change about how they're supposed to fix that and help that. So they're not getting their benefits. They're not getting what's due them. We really, let's fix that. If we want to say we really support our troops, then let's do that. I agree with that. Yes, let's actually do that if we're going to say we support our troops. But what we really mean, what Congress really means, and what our president really means when they say we're going to support our troops is we're going to spend multiple hundreds of billions of dollars that we're going to pay to contractors like Raytheon and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and all these other guys, Lockheed. We're going to give them billions of dollars. Those are corporations. Those are not veterans. That's not our troops. We will spend ridiculous amounts of money. And by the way, that money that we're spending on a war machine that is already dwarfs all the other 12 nations in the world combined, and by the way, those are mostly our allies, the money that we're spending on that is money that we could be spending on education, food. More than 50% of school children in America are living in poverty. Do you know why that is? Because we're spending multiple hundreds of billions of dollars on rockets and tanks and machine guns and jets that the Pentagon has already said they do not want or need. But it doesn't matter what they want. It doesn't matter what anyone wants, what the American people want. What matters is what those corporations want, because unfortunately they seem to run our country. And I'm sorry, I don't normally spend my time and energy on a podcast talking about politics. And if I haven't said it before, let me say it here. personally, I put no hope or faith in any political party or system or politician or government. I do not believe that even the most well-meaning politician, no matter what their party or platform might be, has the ability to change this nation. It just isn't going to happen. The gospel is the only hope for this nation and for our people. The only thing that's going to change our hearts, because that's what it's going to take, is the gospel of Jesus. And so if it sounds like I'm being political, I'm not leaning left or right or middle, because I don't think voting for anybody or subscribing to any political platform or ideology will make a bit of difference. And that's just my opinion. And that's one thing that I wish Christians could do, is just let go of the rhetoric, let go of their political party. Forget this garbage about the right or the left or the middle or whatever. Forget the political posturing. Forget all of that. Go to Jesus. Read the Gospels. Read the red letters. If there's any hope for this nation, you're going to find it there. You're going to find it there. I don't believe voting is going to change anything. And that, again, that's a whole other story. I just had these thoughts on my mind and my heart after seeing this movie. I say this a lot, that we're all in process, and I'm certainly in process. And the Keith of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago wouldn't have said these things and wouldn't have agreed with these things that I'm saying now. I have learned, and I'm growing in so many different ways, and I hope and pray I'm going to keep growing, and that Jesus is going to keep on doing this work in my heart, rearranging the furniture, breaking down the lies, breaking down the myths. We live in an empire, and empires do what empires do to continue to be the strongest empire they can, and that's you can wrap that up in music, and you can wrap that up in a flag, and you can wrap that up in God Bless America if you want to. But in the end, I don't believe God blesses any of that, or that Jesus wants anything to do with any of that. Jesus has rejected the kingdoms of this world. And I love that verse in Revelation. I just looked it up the other day and shared it, where it's talking about how, hallelujah, the kingdoms of this world have been replaced by the kingdom of our God. And that's what's going to have to happen. I mean, face it. For the kingdom of Jesus to advance, for the kingdom of God to fully come and reign, every other kingdom on this planet will have to fall, and America is one of those kingdoms. It's going to have to collapse and fail and burn and fall into the ashes and fade away until no one could ever even tell you what the Pledge of Allegiance was, because they couldn't even remember it, because it's gone. It will be erased from history. There will be no Americans in heaven. There'll be no Germans in heaven. There'll be no British people in heaven. There'll be no Jews in heaven. There will be children of the Lamb, citizens of the King and of the kingdom. That's who will be in heaven. There'll be one holy nation. And we will no longer speak of or remember those fallen, failed, man-made kingdoms and nations of this world, because I believe at least then we will finally see that none of them meant anything, and none of them stood for anything other than their own selfish pursuits and gains and riches and wealth and power, which Jesus has rejected, and that I believe we should as well. So my rant is complete. I do recommend that you go watch the film, but I recommend that you watch the film with your heart open and your eyes open. Anyway, and I'd love to hear what you think. If you've seen the film and you agree or disagree, please give me a note. Let me know. God bless. Thank you for your time. Good night, and let the kingdom come.